10 years of siege had finally ended, and the fires beneath the walls of Troy had gone dark. Along the shore, tired soldiers stood before their ships, almost afraid to step aboard. Among them stood Odysseus, king of the small island of Ithaca, a man known less for brute strength than for a mind sharp enough to end a war with a single wooden horse. He believed the worst was behind him. He had no way of knowing the gods had not finished with him yet, and that the sea itself was about to become his greatest enemy. As the fleet pulled away from the smoldering ruins, an unnatural wind swept in from nowhere. High on Olympus, the sea god Poseidon fixed his attention on one small line of ships and did not look away.
Hey, welcome back to VoxNovella. And on this channel, I bring the greatest stories ever told back to life. One myth, one legend, one epic at a time. Today, we're diving into one of the oldest adventures in human history. A story of monsters, gods, and a man who just wanted to go home. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Their first landing was among the Ciconies, and Odysseus's men, still hungry for plunder after years of war, sacked the town instead of moving on. The Ciconies returned in greater numbers than expected, and by the time the fighting ended, many of Odysseus's men were dead, the rest driven back to their ships in disgrace. Days later, a storm pushed them onto a strange coast where the air hung thick and sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. The people there gave his scouts a curious flower to eat, the lotus, and the instant they tasted it, something behind their eyes went soft and far away. They forgot Ithaca entirely. They forgot their families and the king standing in front of them, wanting only more of the flower and the warm, hollow peace it gave. Odysseus dragged his own crewmen back to the ships in chains, tears running down their faces, not for the home they were returning to, but for the lotus they were being torn away from.
On the next island, Odysseus and a small party entered a great cave stocked with cheese and penned lambs, and against his better judgment, chose to wait and meet whoever called it home. What returned that evening was no man at all, a cyclops, a giant with a single burning eye set in the middle of his forehead, called Polyphemus. He rolled a boulder across the entrance, a stone so vast that 20 men together could not have shifted it, and Odysseus felt his stomach drop as he understood. They were sealed inside with a monster. That night and the next, Polyphemus seized 2 men at a time and devoured them raw, while the rest pressed themselves into the shadows, listening to bone crack. Odysseus told the giant his name was Nobody, a small lie that would matter far more than he expected. When Polyphemus finally collapsed, drunk on wine Odysseus had offered him, the men drove a fire-hardened stake into his single eye. His scream tore through the cave, and when the other Cyclops came running to ask who had hurt him, he bellowed back, "Nobody is hurting me!" And baffled, they turned away. Blind and raging, Polyphemus swept his hands across the cave floor searching for the men, but they had lashed themselves beneath the bellies of his own sheep and slipped past him into the morning light. It was only once they were safely at sea that Odysseus made his fatal mistake, shouting his true name back at the shore in triumph. Weeping with fury,
the blinded Cyclops called out to his father for vengeance on the man who had done this to him. His father's name was Poseidon.
Aeolus, keeper of the winds, received Odysseus warmly and sent him off with a gift, a leather bag holding every storm wind in the world sealed shut, leaving only the gentle west wind free to guide them home. For 9 days, the plan worked perfectly. Ithaca finally rose into view, smoke curling from familiar hills, close enough that the men swore they could smell home. But while Odysseus slept, his crew, convinced the sealed bag concealed hidden treasure, crept over and opened it. Every storm in the world broke loose at once, hurling the ship backward across the sea, all the way to Aeolus' shore, who now refused to help a second time, certain the gods themselves had cursed this crew. Odysseus wept on that beach, home glimpsed so briefly, and now farther away than it had ever been.
They came upon a harbor so calm and sheltered that most of the fleet moored close together, grateful for a night's rest. But the people living on the cliffs above were giants, the Laestrygonians, and they were not curious about their visitors. They were hungry. Boulders the size of houses crashed down from above, splintering ships apart, while the giants waded into the wreckage, spearing men like fish. Only Odysseus' own ship, kept wisely outside the trap, escaped the slaughter. Of the 12 ships that had sailed from Troy, 11 were gone within a single terrible hour.
Smoke curled above a palace deep in the island's forest, and a woman's voice drifted through the trees, so beautiful that Odysseus' scouts walked toward it as if pulled by invisible thread. The witch goddess Circe welcomed them with wine and a feast, and one sip transformed every man but one into a pig, a human mind trapped inside an animal's body. Odysseus went alone to face her, protected by a magical herb the god Hermes had given him, and when her spell failed to work on him, Circe understood exactly what kind of man now stood before her. Rather than continue the fight, she restored his men and let Odysseus stay a full year on her island, safe, comfortable, and for the first time since Troy, genuinely at peace. Peace was never going to be his fate. Eventually, his men reminded him of home, and Circe, with something close to sorrow, told him what leaving would cost: a voyage first to the land of the dead.
At the edge of the world, Odysseus dug a pit and filled it with the blood of sacrifice, and the dead came to drink from it, pale and restless, starving for even one moment of the life they had lost. Among them came the blind prophet Tiresias, who warned him of trials still ahead, and of one final danger waiting on his own island, should his crew ever touch the sacred cattle of the sun. Then came his own mother, who had died of grief while waiting for his return. And when Odysseus reached for her 3 times, his arms closed only on mist. He saw the great warriors of Troy gathered among the dead, and one of them, Achilles, told him something he never forgot: that he would rather serve as a living slave to the poorest man on earth than rule as a king over the dead. The voices around him grew louder and hungrier, and Odysseus fled back to his ship before the shadows pressed in too close.
Circe had warned him of the sirens, whose song promised every listener the one thing they wanted most, and whose shoreline was littered with the bones of men who had swum toward that promise and never come back. Odysseus sealed his men's ears with wax, but trusted his own curiosity too little, and ordered himself bound to the mast so that he alone could listen and still live. As the ship passed the island, the song reached him. His own glory and his own name sung back more sweetly than he had ever dared imagine, and he strained against the ropes, begging his deafened crew to set him free. They only rowed harder, exactly as he had commanded before the song began, until it faded into silence behind them.
Ahead lay a strait with two horrors, one on each side, close enough that avoiding one meant sailing straight into the other. On the left, Charybdis swallowed the entire sea 3 times a day, a whirlpool strong enough to pull down an entire ship. On the right, hidden in a cliffside cave, waited Scylla, a monster with 6 heads on long serpent necks, impossible to outrun and impossible to fight. Odysseus chose the lesser horror and steered close to Scylla's cliff, fully aware of what it would cost him. 6 heads struck down at once, and 6 of his men were dragged screaming into the dark. And all Odysseus could do was watch, powerless, as the price for keeping the rest of his crew alive.
Trapped on the island of the sun god by storms that would not let them sail, Odysseus's men grew hungrier by the day, eyeing the sacred cattle they had already been warned twice never to touch. While Odysseus slept, starvation succeeded where fear had failed, and his men slaughtered several of the sacred cows, feasting in secret and telling themselves the gods would forgive it. The gods did not forgive it. Once they finally set sail, Zeus struck their ship with a bolt of lightning, tearing it apart and drowning every man aboard. Every man except Odysseus, who clung alone to broken wreckage as the current carried him away from everyone he had led out of Troy.
The sea carried Odysseus onto the shore of the nymph Calypso, who nursed him back to health, and then, quietly, would not let him leave. 7 years passed this way. She offered him immortality and an endless paradise, and every single day he sat on the shore instead, watching the horizon, grieving for a home he no longer knew if he would ever see again. Only when the gods themselves intervened, finally moved by the length of his suffering, was Calypso ordered to release him. And though it broke something in her, she watched him build the raft that would carry him away from her for good.
One final storm from Poseidon destroyed his raft, and Odysseus washed up naked and half-drowned on the shore of the Phaeacians, a seafaring people ruled by a generous king. In their hall, fed, clothed, and safe at last, Odysseus told the full story of everything that had happened to him. The Cyclops, Circe, the dead, the sirens, Scylla, the storm that claimed his final ship. The king listened without a word, and when the story ended, gave Odysseus a ship of his own, crewed by his finest sailors, asking nothing in return but the honor of having brought him home. Athena disguised Odysseus as an old beggar before he ever set foot on Ithaca, so he could see, unrecognized, exactly what 20 years of absence had done to his home. His palace was overrun. More than 100 arrogant young suitors had camped there for years, devouring his cattle and courting his wife, certain he was dead and never coming back. His own dog, Argos, old and flea-bitten, lifted his head as the beggar approached, caught his master's scent after 2 decades apart, and died moments later. The only living thing on Ithaca to know him on sight, and the last thing he ever did was welcome him home. Odysseus said nothing, swallowed the grief rising in his throat, and walked into his own hall. As a stranger, worn down after years of stalling her suitors, Penelope finally announced a contest. Whoever could string her husband's old bow and shoot an arrow clean through 12 axe heads in a row
would win her hand. One by one, the strongest men in the hall tried and failed, unable even to bend the bow, humiliated in front of one another. Then the ragged old beggar asked for his turn, and the hall dissolved into laughter and insults, until, with quiet, practiced ease, he strung the bow as if it weighed nothing at all. The laughter died instantly. The arrow flew clean through all 12 axe heads, and for one long, terrible second, no one in the hall dared to move or breathe.
Now, Odysseus said, for a different target, and swung the bow toward the suitors themselves. With his son Telemachus and 2 loyal servants beside him, he barred the doors, and for the first time in 20 years let go of everything he had been holding back. Arrows found their marks one after another, and the great hall that had feasted on his cattle for years became a battlefield within minutes. By the time it was over, every suitor who had disrespected his house lay dead on the floor, and Odysseus stood alone among them, a king again, in every sense that mattered.
Cautious after so many false hopes and disguised strangers, Penelope tested him one last time. She asked a servant to move their marriage bed, a bed Odysseus himself had built around the trunk of a living olive tree, immovable by design. When he reacted with genuine shock, the bed could not be moved. He had built it that way himself. Penelope finally let herself believe. 20 years after first sailing for Troy, Odysseus was home, truly home, with the wife who had waded through every version of hope and grief a person can survive. Outside, the sea that had taken so much from him rolled quietly against the shore of Ithaca. Calm at last.
All right, guys, that's it for today's video, and I just want to say thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the video reach more people. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe to VoxNovella and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything new. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of this video and what you'd like to see next. Also, share this video with anyone you think might enjoy it. See you in the next one. Take care.